My mother was a storyteller. She told me so many stories about growing up in Cuba, in Camagüey, her city by the sea. She told me over and over again how much she loved the beach. So many years later, when she met my father, the love of her life, in Havana, they went on their luna de miel on a Harley Davidson to Varadero Beach. But it was also the cusp of the communist revolution. And though they tried to build a life there, my father said to me, if they had stayed, he would have been executed as a dissident. Because like me, he wanted to live in a country with freedom of speech. So they left. And they weren't allowed to take much with them. The regime had confiscated so much private property. So my mother only had a few changes of clothes, one bag, but in that bag was something that she loved, and it was a tube of Elizabeth Arden red lipstick. Not only was it a luxury, it was an American luxury. I was born in el exilio. A few years later, in Puerto Rico. And I was raised in Miami. And I grew up with these stories about Cuba. And I was filled with nostalgia, which means paying for the home. And I knew it was a home that I would never see. In fact, I grew sick of these stories because I was saturated with it. And I just wanted to be an American kid free of all that trauma. The years went by, and my mother succumbed to Alzheimer's. And her once voluptuous body, as she dressed up with beautiful clothes and with lipstick, of course, is shriveled. And as her body began to shrivel, so did her stories. They just faded away. Threads of memory just disappeared. So when she died, my father was still in a nursing home. He also had Alzheimer's. And I was tasked with the impossible task of dismantling the home. My parents had not downsized. And all of a sudden, I found myself with everything they had hoarded over the years. Because they had lost everything, they kept everything. And they were clean and organized, but they just had so much stuff. And my mom had all these clothes in this huge walk-in closet. So I called up some girlfriends of mine and I said, you gotta come over and help me. I can't do this, I'm exhausted and my father's dying. So they did. And they grabbed a bunch of clothes and one of them bought champagne and we celebrated my mother's life that way. But there was still more clothes. And so one night, I'm sitting there on the floor next to a pile of clothes and I'm sorting. And I look up to the ceiling and my voice will echo in the house because now it's empty of furniture. And I say, Mami, ¿por qué me hiciste esto? Why did you do this to me? I was so resentful then. But then in the pile, I saw the dress. I lifted up the dress and I couldn't believe it. It was a dress that was in a photo that I remember so vividly of us together from the 70s. And she's standing there looking so gorgeous and she's holding my hand and I'm looking up at her. This was a dress like a cotton linen with crochet on the flouncy sleeve, a very plunging neckline, a crochet waist, and about cocktail length. And I was wearing something adorable because she liked to dress up and I was her little doll, her little muñequita. And so I looked up and I said, okay, I get it now. Ya entiendo why you saved everything. Because you wanted me to have this dress. And I kept it. And I folded it up nice and neat. and I put it next to the box with her ashes. Now this was a nondescript box, not worthy of her. It was just a carton box, and inside there was a plastic bag, and those were her cremains. So I wanted to wait until my father died to combine their ashes and take it to the beach. And maybe someday, I still have this fantasy of going to Varadero Beach. But it hurts me to even think about going to Cuba, knowing what my parents had to go through to leave. And they had it easy compared to other exiliados and refugees. So one day I'm just looking at the box and I said, no, ya, basta. I can't stand it. It was like talking to me and saying, please, please let me go. So I put on the dress and this beautiful blue broad-brimmed hat. And of course, I put on some lipstick. Because my mother used to say, píntate la bemba, mija, que vas a vestir de monja. So you're never going to meet a husband, you're going to become a nun if you don't paint your face. So I wanted to look especially good for her on this very special day. The weather cooperated. It was warm and sunny and breezy. And I went to Thalata Estate, which is this beautiful 1930s Mediterranean estate in Palmetto Bay. And it has this sloping green lawn down to the water. And I processed down to the water holding her. And I took off my shoes and I got in the water. It was shallow. And I slowly let her go. I held her in my hands. And on the water there was this sheen. And it was like gossamer floating out to sea. I said, ay, mami, ay, vuelve a tu Cuba. So I felt something at that moment that I have never felt since, and that was the deepest love I have ever known. I felt like all was forgiven. I was connected to everything. And I was closer to her then than I ever was. And so I kept that in my heart. A few months later, my father passed away. And so I combined their ashes and I took them back to the same spot so they could go to have their forever honeymoon at whatever beach they want. But I kept some of those ashes because you never know. I released them both back to the sea. And then I also released myself. I was there at the tender age of 49 with nothing to anchor me in Miami anymore. I wanted to get the fuck out of Miami. And so I got a ticket for a red eye on a Greyhound bus, and I got a duffel bag which contained all of my earthly belongings because I wanted to hold on to nothing material. And I spent that night slowly letting go of the pain and the trauma, as it takes 7 hours to get out of the state of Florida. I don't think I slept much, but I needed to grieve in ways that I hadn't done because I had been the primary caregiver, and I don't think I slept for 6 years. So when we got to the border of Georgia, we stopped at a truck stop, as Greyhound trips tend to do. And I went to the bathroom and I could not recognize the woman in the mirror. She had eye bags and dark circles. She had no makeup on and she looked like shit. She was haggard and tired, and I said, okay, let's go get some coffee. And as I'm paying for the coffee, I see there on the counter next to the boiled peanuts is a little box with lipstick. 99 cents. And so I bought some. And as I'm walking to the bus, I stand in front of a fuel pump. It has an aluminum panel, and I can barely see my face, but I put some on. And I say to myself, all exile is painful, but at least it should be beautiful.